Well, good morning and welcome back to the carving shop. This is Tom Christie, and this will be session 2 of carving a cork magnum size black duck hunting decoy, cork-bodied. And in session 1, if you missed that, we got all the components bandsawed out and kind of pieced together. In this session, we'll work on uh, carving the head and getting that ready to go. As a reminder, we're doing a gunning decoy, so on the head there's not going to be a ton of build details. It's going to be pretty simple, but still very important to be correct. So I'll show you how I go about that. And if you're enjoying my channel, please hit the subscribe button. It's totally free, but that does help me out. I appreciate it. Let's get started. All right, we'll start with some layout work on the head. If you've watched my other videos, this will be a familiar procedure, but in case you haven't, I just wanted to include it here because this layout work is important. I've got a pattern of the magnum bill and head from a top-down view, and just a little tip to make sure I'm on a center line. Sometimes I'll cut a little diamond out of the center line so I can make sure that I've got the bill lined up correctly, and then I've traced around that. And this bill pattern is sized up because it's a magnum bird. And then from the side, I want to get a dimension from the tip of the bill back to where we meet the cheek here. Transfer that to the wood, and I just hold it on the tip here and strike a little arc in the wood with my dividers. Do that both sides so that we get symmetry. I'll pencil that in so you can see it a little better. So a little arc there. If I were to put that arc on the picture itself, on the pattern, it's right here. And I just did that to show you that we've got a little, I call it a return here, where the bill goes back towards the eye, and that's an important feature. And then down below, we're going to go back in this direction. So first thing I like to do is get that cheek location set. So I'm going to use a straight edge and just pencil that up and down like that. And then I can use my bandsaw lines to get a nice straight line across here. I'm going to do the same thing on this side then. And then it's also important to, for me anyway, to put the pattern of the bill on the underside. And that's to make sure that I don't undercut the bill or overcut it when I'm cutting it out. So I have a good pattern top and bottom, and then we can connect those lines up. Again, using the bandsaw lines makes it easy to get a nice straight line across without a square there. Okay, and then from this point, the head is going to come back, kind of past the eye normally a little bit. Again, I'm going to use my bandsaw lines to sketch a line across there. Then the cheek is going to lay in right here. This is going to be tucked up against the breast of the bird, so it's going to be puffed out right through the middle of the eye and about back to there as a guideline. Okay, back here, I'm not going to come to a sharp point back here, but I'm going to come about to that cheek line. I don't want to cut too much material off from the top and end up with skinny cheeks back here. In this tucked head position especially, they kind of puff out, and we're going to want to use that to convey the nice relaxed position here. So I want to leave enough material in this widest part of the cheek and not cut that off when we're making these cuts from the top of the bird. I've actually got that penciled in too close. Didn't do a good job there, so repencil. You can always redo it before you start cutting. You may want to skip this. I just like the layout work because of that's a great example. I want to get my lines right before we start the cutting process. Okay, I'm going to use my coping saw, make these bill cuts. I'm checking my pattern below to make sure I don't have my blade angled, and so I'm not undercutting the bill. Undercutting or overcutting. I'm going to cut right down to this line here. And this is where I need to slow down so I don't go too deep and cut into the face there. And then I like to go ahead and cut across to meet up with that bill cut. And again, slow down so you don't gouge the side of the bill here. I've done that many times. But I like to make that cut to really set that cheek line. And now I'll make this cut from here down to here. Now I'm going to go from the edge here down to my guideline on the side and cut this wedge off the front. Sometimes I'll do this with a band saw. It just depends on the geometry of the head. I'll do that both sides, and then we'll cut off the back pieces. Make these cuts from the back. Tighten my vise. Do that both sides. Alright, now I want to do some layout work on the bill. I do have a life-size black duck drake study bill, and you can see the bill on this Magnum Decoy is larger. I don't have a Magnum study bill, obviously, but we can look at the study bill and make some comparisons, and that'll help get dimensions correct. I know this dimension, and I was just checking for myself to see, I wanted to know how deep does this notch come down? In other words, how far from the tip of the bill to the point of the notch. So I've got that on the life-size version, and I was just comparing it to this side dimension, and they're pretty much the same. So I'm going to use that same logic to scale up to my Magnum bill and use that length dimension again to help me locate where this notch should fall. So it comes down to that point in front, and it's about a ½ inch between point to point, so I'm going to upscale that a bit, and I've got 5/8 on my pattern just roughed out, so I'm going to use 5/8 as a guideline on the width of the notch. And then as far as how far it comes back on the side, we can get a dimension again from the tip of the bill. Kind of give myself a guideline on the carving here. That's kind of what I'm shooting for, and you can see it's maybe a quarter of an inch down from the top of the head there, and that's going to go back out. So I'll do that on both sides. I'll continue that layout work, but I'm doing this because I need to figure out how far this notch comes back again on the Magnum, and as long as I bring it back to that point, I'm going to be good to go. I'm going to get a similar dimension from the rictus, the corner where the upper and lower mandible meet at the face, to the tip of the bill. And I want to use my dividers to kind of give myself a guideline on the carving on the wood. How far back does that come down below? Kind of awkward angles here to keep things in the camera, so I apologize for a little bit of jostling around. So I know it comes back that far, but in order to get the size of the upper mandible set correctly, I'm just going to go from the bottom of the chin there, and how far up the face does that corner point come? And it looks like I'm right on it there, and that looks good too, so I got lucky. A little bit of experience helps too. But that helps us form. Now we're going to want to remove material here, here, on this side, here, here, and form this notch. All right, we've got layout work done for the bill. Let's go ahead and get some carving done. All right, this is at 2 times speed, and I'm going to start with this 1/8 inch diameter ruby cylinder. And I'm going to shape up the notch here where the top of the bill meets the crown. And I've penciled in the side profile. So I'm taking this wood out down to that side profile. Pay attention to the shape of the notch. That varies by species a little bit.
And so that's important to make sure we get the shape right. Now I'm going to start moving down the side of the bill and defining that area. And I'm taking material out to keep the, right now, to keep the bill width consistent as it goes back into the face. And now I'm going to remove material down in this area, right in the corner. Same thing here. We want the bill thickness to remain the same as it goes back into the corner where the upper and lower mandible meet there. Okay, I've got most of that wood removed, and now we're going to want to round off some of those hard edges. I want to work on the crown thickness, and I think my pattern, I've got 1 5/8 thickness. I'll probably leave a little extra, so 1 3/4, so that as I'm shaping the crown and sanding, I don't get too narrow. So I'm splitting the difference here around the center line to get the crown width. And then that joins up with the notch, goes to its widest point right above or behind the eye, and then narrows up a bit back towards the center line as we go around the back of the head. Now I want to pencil in that eye channel again so that we know roughly where that falls. And then we're going to remove material to take the crown down to this target width. I'm going to use this 3/4 inch round cylindrical saber-tooth burr and just carefully begin to take wood out down to the eye channel so that we leave the cheek at the full width of the head. And I just recommend you go at this slowly. Just don't try to take too much too quickly, and work it down gradually. You've got to watch the grain a little bit with a burr, and so I'm changing the angle a little bit to compensate for grain differences. Because as you push a burr against grain, it has a tendency to want to snag or jump. And I just want everybody to be careful if they're working with power carving tools. I always try to regrip my hands so that if I would slip, I'm not pulling the burr into a finger or into my hand. I've done that before. I don't want to do it again. Now I'm just rounding the bill. This is all rough work, kind of getting the head shaped up and removing wood that we don't need. Now I'm going to work to define that cheek and continue to narrow the head up at the top there. I'm going to speed this video up from here forward. That'll let us get through this quicker, but you can still see what I'm doing. And I just want you to know I'm not carving this fast. So I'm just continuing to work that down gradually. This piece of Tupelo is relatively hard, and you'll see changes from pieces of Tupelo. Some carve like butter, some like this one are a little harder, and it's just going to take more time. Now I'm starting around the cheek and get that shaped up. I've got this side down to the proper crown width. And now I'm just rounding things in general. I don't want to lose that line where the bill meets the cheek. It's still there. So we're going to use that as we finalize the shape of the bill. Just taking material off the back of the head. I'm going to show you one side, and then we won't go through video on the second side. We'll go through the same process. A little bit of roundness as the cheek meets the breast. So I want that undercut just a little bit. A nice round shape. All right, so I'll get that done on this side, and then we'll come back and take a look. All right, I've got that side taken care of. You can see the head kind of shaping up, and I'm going to go back to my 1/8 inch cylindrical ruby, and now I want to work to refine the bill as it meets the cheeks here. And just get that cleaned up and defined. I am at 2 times speed here, just so you're aware. So I'm going around the entire bill and kind of starting to round the crown there as it comes off the top of the bill, and rounding the cheeks as we get that bill cleaned up. That's looking pretty good. Now I'm rounding this material off to remove any shelves, so we have a nice rounded approach to the bill. Just repenciling my lines so that I can take a look at symmetry. It's a little easier to see with pencil lines. Make sure we're level here. Now we'll work on the lower mandible separation. All right, I want to get a measurement from the tip of the bill back to where the upper and lower mandible meet in the corner there. And transfer that to my wood. Same thing on this side. There's a little upturn right here, and then just take a look at the shape of that study bill, and we want to duplicate that. Kind of a gentle curve there after the downturn in the corner. Got that penciled in. That looks about right. Now I'm going to use the knife carefully. Cut in that little corner upturn, and then very carefully score this separation line, and do this. If you go at it too hard, it's very easy to drive the knife through and split out wood underneath. So you just need to take your time and just gradually make that maybe a 1/16 of an inch deep. And then we're going to go from this direction and make a cut down. And go underneath at 1/16 of an inch, and again, just score a little bit at a time. And you may have to go back and forth to get a nice clean separation. You can also do this with grinding equipment and take this lower mandible down lower, but just showing you one way. I don't want to lose that corner and have it chip out. So you can see it. This wood is a little bit tough, so it's taking some time, but I'm getting there. So now we've got a little shadow there cast. That's all the detail we're going to put on this bill. I'm going to do some sanding, obviously, and I want to clean up this area. There's a little bit of wood under there, so we'll get some grinding equipment and clean that up. All right, back to grinding at 2 times speed. I'm using this little cylinder to get in and clean up that lower mandible and blend it into the face down there so we don't have any hard edges. Same thing here, it's relatively easy to clean up any knife marks or splinters or anything remaining after the knife work. Now I want to relieve this wood under the lower mandible. That mandible kind of continues its line back into the face. So I'm going to carefully use my knife and just cut out a little triangle here. And that'll help us begin to form the V shape under the bill. I'm just trying to get a good position here where I can get a good camera angle and still keep my hands safe, which is the goal. Going ahead with that little cylindrical ruby bit and cleaning that work up. And shaping up this V shape under the lower mandible. Just cleaning things up, rounding things. But you can see now I'm going to use a little bullet-shaped ruby bit to go ahead and round everything so we have nice soft transitions from that lower mandible and from the upper mandible into the face. This is all at 2 times speed as a reminder. Just cleaning things up in general. You can see that little V shape under the chin there, under the lower mandible, I mean. All right, that's shaping up pretty good. Now I'm just going to use my 1/2-inch sanding drum and do some rough sanding here to smooth things out and shape things up. This is to smooth, but it also is nice for finalizing the shapes. This is probably 120 grit sandpaper, so relatively rough sanding, so I can still remove material with this little sanding drum. Rounding the tip of the bill off. You can see I'm pushing that away from me, and that tends to be less aggressive than pulling it, at least the rotation that I'm using on my Fordham. Okay, that looks pretty good. I want to stop and check things. Now that I've got the rough shaping and some sanding done on the head, I want to get the eye width set correctly. And from the top down, I've got my calipers to give me a guideline. So I need to take out wood on both sides in this eye channel area until I get down to that width dimension on the calipers. Don't have to take out a lot, but some. I'm going to use this bullet-shaped ruby bit and just follow my eye hole guideline and create the eye channel to get those down at the proper width. This is a very common mistake that newer carvers especially don't have good reference material, or they don't pay attention in this area, and they get their eyes bugged out way too far or way too narrow, and it really detracts from the look of the bird. So I spend some time making sure that the distance between the eyes is correct. You can see I'm not quite there, so I'm going to keep going. It's good to check along the way so I don't go too deep. And as I'm creating that channel, I'm rounding down into the cheek and I'm rounding up into the crown. So it's a nice soft, it's not a deep trench with hard lines. It needs to be a nice soft transition up and down. A little bit deeper, just about there. That looks good. Now I'll do a little sanding with the 1/2-inch drum again and just smooth things out and make it look natural. Kind of angle that cheek down under the eye now that I have the proper depth. So I'll go ahead and sand the head a bit and then we'll come back. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I want to round the crown, and I'm using my 3/4 inch diameter round nose saber tooth burr. This is a fine tooth burr. The yellow is the fine tooth. And I'm just going to round that crown and make sure that I'm not taking width off of the crown as I'm rounding, which is easy to do. The other thing, I'm going to keep my center line intact. You've heard me say that before. If you lose your center line, you've lost your pattern. And it's amazing to me how subtle a change can change the look of the bird completely. So I really pay attention to that. The center line stays on there until I'm doing my final sanding, and then it comes off when I'm sure everything is right. I'm going to speed this up. You can see the crown of the black duck is fairly round. Some ducks not so much, but black duck has pretty round crown. Very similar to a mallard. Now I'm going to use my sanding drum and just finalize the rough sanding. Get everything smoothed out. Make sure it's symmetrical. I'll do some hand sanding when I'm done with the drum just to finish things up. That's looking pretty good. I'll keep going over this. Just finishing up with some hand sanding. And that just helps make everything round and smooth. Just about done with the carving on the head. Last step here, I like to put a little cheek structure from the corner of the bill there, and then especially in a tucked head position, the feathers tend to bunch up as that head gets pressed down into the breast. So I want to portray that in my carving. I'm just checking symmetry here again from side to side. And that looks good. I'm going to use this bullet-shaped ruby bit and wrap it around in this fashion to create a groove to begin with, and then smooth that out going in both directions. So we have good roundness and not a harsh trench. When I'm done with this, I want the light from above to just barely cast a shadow in that cheek area. No hard lines. So I'll work that shape for a while, and then I'm going to use my 1/2 inch drum, and this is really good for this purpose. That 1/2 inch is just about the right size to get in here and do some final shaping of the cheeks and smooth things out at the same time. Just finish that up. That looks pretty good.
Okay, next we'll work on installing the eyes. I'm going to use my dividers and go from the tip of the bill here where it meets the face to the front of the eye and transfer that to my carving. So I have that position nailed down both sides. And then I'm going to be using Michael Braun eyes, 12 millimeter eyes. Michael does a great job of providing quality eyes for the carving community. MRB Decoys. If you haven't checked him out, check out his website. All right, I'm going to get my circle template and pencil in the location of the eye, and then we'll get ready to set the eyes. Now I'm going to use a little gouge and very carefully press that in. Some people use an eye drill, the proper dimension. This is just the way I started doing it, so sometimes old habits die hard. But if it works, why change? Just pop that out like that. I'll do the same on this side, and when I was doing my template work with the circle template, that's a good time to take a look from the front and make sure the eyes look level before you start opening up the eye holes. There'll be a little bit of an adjustment that we can do if we make these holes a little larger than the eye inserting. All right. I'm using Epoxy Sculpt for my eye set. It's a water-based product. And you need the two components together. And then I've just got an old paintbrush that I use for this purpose, and I'm going to wet the eye socket and the surrounding area to promote bonding of the epoxy sculpt to the wood. And then I'm just going to fill that hole and press in the epoxy sculpt. Get my eye, and I'm going to crowd the front of the eye opening because that's where I took my reference dimension. And I'm just pressing this in. I want a little forward cant and a little downward just slightly, the way the actual bird's eyes are set. And I've got to press that in deep enough. It's kind of a judgment call how deep to go, but I still want to be able to see the pupil from the front. That looks like it's about right. Now I'm going to take some additional epoxy sculpt and press that around the opening. Just kind of get it roughly in place above and some below. Kind of pinch it into place. The epoxy sculpt is pretty stiff. Okay. Then I'm going to wet my finger and use that to go over this material and smooth it out, because I don't want any visible line between the epoxy sculpt and the surrounding wood. I'm just going back and forth with a wet finger to blend that into the surrounding area. And right now I'm covering the eye up. Not worried about that. I want to get this blended in first. And now I'm going to use an old paintbrush that's been retired, and I use for this purpose to kind of open up the eye. And you could use clay modeling tools for this, because the epoxy sculpt is very similar to clay. And then I'm smoothing that back out as I begin to open the eye up. I want to make sure I keep a nice smooth transition into the surrounding area. So I want to form this kind of almond shape front to back. This is an iterative process. It'll take some time, and I don't know that you need to watch the entire thing. This is probably enough. But again, I want a clear eye channel going forward so I can see the pupil from the front. Because as the bird is feeding, he or she is looking right down there towards where the food is and needs to be able to see. I know this is a decoy, but that's what we're going for. So I'll keep working this, and as I get it refined, I'll use different brushes to clear material off. And we can do a little bit of sculpting of the epoxy sculpt after it's cured. So some final refinements will be done after it's cured. So that's getting close. I'll keep working on that. I'll check my dimension here. Seems like I'm off on my dimension, so I'm probably going to have to move that eye forward. I hate that, but it happens. It looks a little too far back. Take the time now. Stop while you can, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move that eye forward because it's important that it's in the correct position, and you can see it's a little too far back there for my liking. All right, I've moved the eye forward, and I'm where I want to be now. And I'm going to leave that part in the video because I think it's important to know that everybody makes mistakes, and it's going to happen. So sometimes video editing makes everything look easy, and I think it's important to know as a carver that, especially a new carver, things happen. But I also want to drive home the point, now's the time to make the change. It's easy to convince yourself that, oh, that eye looks okay, but I want to trust my measurements in my pattern and get it right the first time. All right, I've got both eyes set and at the proper dimension, pupils centered in the opening and level from the front, which is sometimes challenging to accomplish. So we'll let that cure and move on to the body. All right, everybody, we'll end session 2 here. We've got the head ready to go. I need to let the epoxy sculpt cure overnight, and then we'll do some light sanding around the eye tomorrow to finish the head. We'll have to get the head sealed, and in session 3, we'll shape up the body and get it ready for full assembly. Until next time, Tom Christie signing out. Good carving to you.